The evening had started with so much promise. Or at least, that's what he kept telling himself as he sat there, alone, watching the seconds tick by on his watch. His name was Daniel, and he was a man who had built his entire life on being early. Early to meetings, early to deadlines, early to every opportunity that had ever come his way. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he was early for something he actually wanted. A blind date, set up by his brother of all people. His brother Mark had been nagging him for months. "You work too much, Dan. You're gonna wake up one day and realize you married that laptop." And Mark wasn't wrong. At 38, Daniel had everything he'd ever dreamed of. A successful architecture firm he'd built from nothing. A penthouse overlooking the city. A car that cost more than most people's college education. But none of it kept him warm at night. None of it laughed at his terrible jokes or asked him how his day went. So he'd agreed to the blind date. He'd put on his favorite navy blazer, arrived 20 minutes early like the overachiever he was, ordered an old-fashioned and waited. That was an hour ago. His blind date was now 55 minutes late. He checked his phone again. No messages, no calls, nothing. He'd been ghosted before, sure, who hadn't, but this felt different, this felt personal. His brother had promised him that this woman was different. "She's incredible, Dan. She's smart, she's funny, she's been through some hard stuff, but she's got this light about her. Just give her a chance." So Daniel gave her a chance. He gave her 55 minutes of his Friday night, and now he was about to give up. He signaled the waiter for the check, already mentally rehearsing the sarcastic text he'd send his brother. But just as the waiter nodded, Daniel heard a small voice, barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, are you Daniel?" He looked down. And there, standing next to his table, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Brown hair in two braids, a purple jacket that was slightly too big for her, and sneakers that lit up every time she shifted her weight. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and looking at him with the kind of serious expression you usually only see on adults who have just gotten bad news. Daniel blinked. Yes, I'm Daniel." The little girl nodded, clearly relieved. "Good. My mom said to look for the sad man in the blue jacket." Daniel glanced down at his blazer. He wasn't sure if he should be offended or impressed. "Your mom sent you?" The girl shook her head. "No, she's crying in the car. She told me to stay put, but I saw you through the window and you looked sadder than she said you'd look, so I came in." She extended the crumpled paper. "This is for you from my mom. She said to give it to you if you were still here." Daniel took the paper. It was a napkin. And on it, written in smudged pen, was a message. "I'm so sorry. My babysitter quit this afternoon. I tried to call you, but your voicemail is full. I'm parked outside. I understand if you want to leave. I wouldn't blame you. Sarah." He looked back at the little girl. "What's your name?" "Mia. I'm 5.5. The half is important." Daniel felt something unexpected. A smile. A real one, not the tight-lipped, polite smile he gave clients. "Well, Mia, of the important half, is your mom still outside?" Mia nodded. "She's on the phone with your brother. She's really embarrassed. She said bringing a kid to a fancy restaurant is like wearing flip-flops to a wedding. Her words, not mine." Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. And in that moment, something shifted. He thought about his empty penthouse, about the leftover takeout containers in his fridge, about the silence that greeted him every single night. Then he looked at Mia, who was now examining the tablecloth like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. "Does your mom like steak?" he asked. Mia shrugged. "She likes food, any food. We don't eat at places like this usually." "Well, tonight we do. Come on, let's go get your mom." He took Mia's hand and she led him through the restaurant like she'd been there 100 times. Outside, a woman was leaning against an old sedan, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand wiping at her eyes. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wore a simple gray sweater that had seen better days, and looked like she hadn't slept in about 3 years. And yet Daniel thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Mark, I know, I'll explain to him tomorrow. It's fine, I'm used to it." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Mia holding Daniel's hand. Her eyes went wide. "Mia, what did I—" "Mommy, this is Daniel. He's not that sad anymore. I fixed it." The woman, Sarah, covered her face with both hands. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I told her to stay in the car. I'm so sorry. This is the worst first impression in the history of humanity." Daniel walked over to her, still holding Mia's hand. "Your daughter is very persuasive. She told me you like food." Sarah lowered her hands, confusion replacing the panic. What? Food. She said you like food, and I was about to eat alone. So I figured, why eat alone when I could eat with two people who also haven't had dinner? Sarah stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. You want us to have dinner with you, here, at this place? Yes, but I'm in a sweater with a stain on it. I didn't notice. My 5-year-old just wandered into a restaurant alone. She's very brave, I like that. Sarah looked at Mia, who was now beaming. Then she looked back at Daniel, searching his face for any sign of sarcasm or pity. She found neither. Okay, she whispered. Okay, but I'm paying for our food. Not a chance, Daniel said, already walking toward the entrance. This was my invitation, remember. They went inside, and the hostess, to her credit, didn't even blink. She just grabbed a booster seat and led them to a corner booth. Mia slid in first, then Sarah, then Daniel. And just like that, a disaster of a blind date became something else entirely. The first 10 minutes were awkward, the way these things always are. Sarah apologized at least 15 times for being late, for the babysitter, for the napkin note, for Mia's wandering, for existing, it seemed. Daniel finally put his hand over hers and said, "If you apologize one more time, I'm going to order the most expensive dessert on the menu and make you eat all of it." Sarah laughed. It was a tired laugh, the kind that came from someone who didn't get to use it often. Deal. And then the conversation started. Not the forced small talk you make with strangers, but the real kind. The kind where you forget you're supposed to be impressing each other and just start talking. Sarah was a kindergarten teacher. She'd been teaching for 8 years, and she loved it with a passion that surprised even her. Kids are honest, she said, cutting her salmon into tiny pieces that she kept pushing around her plate. They don't care about your fancy job or your nice car. They just want to know if you'll listen to them. Really listen. Daniel nodded. That sounds terrifying. It is, but it's also the best thing in the world. They see you, the real you, and if they still like you after that, that's everything. Mia, who had been quietly demolishing a plate of chicken tenders, looked up. I like you, Daniel. You have kind eyes. Sarah blushed. Daniel felt his heart do something weird, something it hadn't done in a very long time. Thank you, Mia. You have kind everything. The rest of the dinner unfolded like a small miracle. They talked about Daniel's work, how he'd started his architecture firm in his one-bedroom apartment with nothing but a laptop and a dream that felt ridiculous even to him. He told her about the buildings he'd designed, the ones that had won awards and the ones that had never made it past the drawing board. He told her about his dad, who had passed away 5 years ago, and how he still caught himself reaching for the phone to call him whenever something good happened. Sarah listened, really listened, the way she said she did with her students. She asked questions that made him think, that made him dig deeper than he normally let himself go. And then she talked about her own life. How she'd been married young to a man who promised her the world and then left when Mia was 6 months old because he wasn't ready to be a father. How she'd worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. How she'd cried in the bathroom more times than she could count, always making sure Mia didn't see. How she'd given up on the idea of anyone ever choosing them. Both of them. Not despite Mia, but including her. Most men run, she said quietly, glancing at her daughter who was now drawing on the corner of the menu with a crayon the waiter had brought. They see a single mom and they think baggage, complicated, not worth it. They're idiots, Daniel said. Sarah looked up, surprised. That was blunt. I'm an architect. We're paid to be blunt. Bad design kills, and walking away from you, from Mia, that's bad design. Sarah smiled, and Daniel saw it. The light his brother had talked about. It wasn't flashy or loud. It was warm, steady, the kind of light that made you want to come home. By the time dessert arrived, Mia had fallen asleep with her head on Sarah's shoulder, her crayon still clutched in her little fist. Daniel signaled for the check, and when the waiter brought it, Sarah tried to grab it. Daniel held it out of reach. You can't even reach it, he said. That's unfair and you know it. Life's unfair. I'm tall. Deal with it. She laughed again, and Daniel decided right then that he wanted to hear that sound every day for the rest of his life. They walked out together, Daniel carrying Mia, who had draped herself over his shoulder like a tiny koala. Sarah kept apologizing for that too, but Daniel just shook his head. She's light. I've carried heavier blueprints. That's not comforting, but okay. He drove them home in his car, which Sarah pretended not to be impressed by. Mia slept in the back seat, her mouth slightly open, her braids coming undone. Sarah gave him directions to her apartment, a modest building on the east side of town. Not dangerous, but not fancy either. The kind of place where the buzzer only worked half the time and the laundry room smelled like someone else's regret. Daniel carried Mia up 2 flights of stairs while Sarah fumbled with the keys. When she finally got the door open, he stepped inside and looked around. The apartment was small, really small. But it was warm. There were drawings taped to the walls, a couch with a blanket thrown over it, a bookshelf overflowing with children's books and worn paperbacks, a small kitchen with a pot still on the stove. It wasn't a penthouse, but it was a home. The kind of home Daniel hadn't realized he'd been missing. He laid Mia on the couch and Sarah covered her with the blanket. "Thank you," she whispered. "For tonight, for being so nice," Daniel offered. "I was going to say human. Most people forget how to do that." He stood there for a moment, not wanting to leave, not wanting to go back to his silent penthouse with its perfect furniture and its perfect emptiness. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Like a real date with notice and a babysitter who actually shows up," Sarah smiled. "I'd like that, but I need to warn you, dating a single mom is not glamorous. There will be last-minute cancellations. There will be tantrums in the grocery store. There will be times when I'm too tired to put on real pants." "I'm an architect," Daniel said. "I spend most of my day in jeans that have pencil marks on them. I can handle no pants." Sarah laughed, and Daniel knew. He was already gone. Over the next several months, they dated in the way that single parents date, which is to say, it was messy and unpredictable and absolutely nothing like the movies. Their first real date was at a pizza place with plastic tables, because Sarah's babysitter had canceled and Mia came along. Mia spent the entire meal telling Daniel about her class hamster, Mr. Whiskers, in excruciating detail. Daniel listened to every word. Their second date was at a park. Mia ran around the playground while Daniel and Sarah sat on a bench and talked about things that mattered. Their fears, their dreams. The stupid little things that made them happy, like the way the light looked in the morning or the smell of old books. Their third date was supposed to be a fancy dinner, but Sarah got called into work because the substitute teacher didn't show up. So Daniel showed up at her school with takeout and ate on her desk while she graded papers. She cried. She didn't mean to. It just happened. Because no one had ever done that for her before. And slowly, week by week, Daniel fell in love. Not just with Sarah, though he absolutely did. He fell in love with the way she tucked Mia's hair behind her ears before bed, with the way she sang off-key in the car and didn't care who heard, with the way she looked at him sometimes like he was something precious and unexpected, like a flower growing through a crack in the sidewalk. But he also fell in love with Mia. With her endless questions about how buildings stayed up and why the sky was blue, and whether Daniel thought Mr. Whiskers missed his family when he was at school. With the way she would crawl into his lap during movie nights and fall asleep with her head on his chest. With the way she had started calling him Daniel, and then, "My Daniel," and then, one night, so quietly he almost missed it, "Daddy." He didn't correct her. He just held her a little tighter and looked at Sarah, who was crying silently on the other end of the couch. 6 months after that disastrous blind date, Daniel invited Sarah and Mia to his penthouse for the first time. He had been nervous about it, worried that the size and the view and the ridiculousness of it all would change how Sarah saw him. But he needn't have worried. Mia ran from room to room, her mouth open in wonder. "It's so big, it's like a castle. Can I have this room, and this one, and this one?" Sarah just stood in the middle of the living room looking out at the city lights. "Daniel, this is too much, I know." "No, it's you. I just didn't understand until now." She turned to face him. "You built all of this with nothing, and you never once made me feel like I was less because I didn't have it. You're not less, you're more, you're so much more." That night, after Mia had fallen asleep in the guest room, surrounded by pillows and blankets and a stuffed animal Daniel had bought her months ago that she refused to go anywhere without, Daniel and Sarah sat on his private balcony. The city sprawled beneath them, a million lights flickering like earthbound stars. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice soft. "I love you, both of you." Sarah's breath caught. "Daniel, I know it's only been 6 months. I know this is complicated. I know I'm not her father and I never will be, but I love her. I love the way she sees the world. I love the way she trusts people even when they've let her down. And I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you never gave up even when everything told you to. I love your messy bun and your stained sweaters and the fact that you still apologize for things that aren't your fault. I love all of it, all of you. Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You're going to make me ruin my mascara. You're not wearing mascara. Exactly, I'm not prepared for this. Daniel laughed and took her hand. I'm not proposing, not yet. I just needed you to know. I'm all in, both of you, whenever you're ready. Sarah kissed him then, and they stayed on that balcony for hours, talking about a future that suddenly felt possible. A future with birthday parties and parent-teacher conferences and someone to come home to. A future that didn't feel so empty anymore. 3 months later, Daniel proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or on a romantic getaway. He proposed in her small apartment on a Tuesday, while Mia was building a tower out of blocks in the corner. He got down on one knee and asked Sarah to marry him, and then he turned to Mia. And Mia, I have a question for you too. Would it be okay if I became your dad? Not to replace anyone, just to be there, to love you and take care of you and your mom, forever. Mia dropped her block. Her eyes went wide. You mean it, you'll stay? I'll stay, Daniel said, his voice breaking. I promise. Mia launched herself at him, wrapping her tiny arms around his neck. Yes, 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 yes. I love you, Daniel. I love you too, sweetheart. Sarah was sobbing, happy sobs, the kind she thought she'd never get to cry. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a garden that Daniel had designed years ago but never thought he'd get to see in person. Mia was the flower girl, and she took her job very seriously, throwing petals with the precision of a tiny drill sergeant. Mark was the best man, and he spent the entire reception telling anyone who would listen that he had known it all along. In his vows, Daniel said, I showed up to that restaurant expecting a blind date. Instead, I got a 5-year-old in a purple jacket who told me I looked sad. And I got a woman who showed me that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. Sarah, Mia, you have given me a family I didn't know I was looking for. You've taught me that love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. In her vows, Sarah said, you could have walked away, most people would have. A blind date with a woman who was an hour late and sent her 5-year-old in to apologize. That's not a red flag, that's a red parade, but you stayed. You didn't just tolerate Mia. You loved her. You saw us as a package and you chose both of us. You gave me permission to believe that I deserve something good, that we deserve something good. And Daniel, you were right, we did. Years later, when people asked how they met, Daniel would smile and tell them about the blind date that started 55 minutes late and included a 5-year-old with a crumpled napkin. It was supposed to be a disaster, he'd say. And it was. But then a little girl walked in and said I looked sad, and that changed everything. And Mia, who was now a teenager and far too cool for most things, would roll her eyes and say, Dad, you were so dramatic. I just wanted you to stop mopping. And Sarah would pull them both into a hug and say, best disaster I ever had. The truth is, the best love stories don't start with perfect timing or ideal circumstances. They start with missed connections and unexpected interruptions, with children who wander into restaurants and men who stay, with women who have been knocked down so many times that they've forgotten what it feels like to stand tall. They start with two people brave enough to see possibility in the middle of chaos. Daniel went looking for a blind date. Instead, he found a family, a purpose, a love that turned his empty penthouse into a home. And all because a 5-year-old in a purple jacket decided that the sad man in the blue jacket needed to meet her mom. What about you? Have you ever had a terrible first date that turned into something amazing? Or maybe you're still waiting for your unexpected interruption to show up. Drop your story in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are rooting for you. And if you enjoyed this story, there's another one I think you'll love. It's about a firefighter who showed up to the wrong address and ended up saving more than he ever expected. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst timing, don't you think?